Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
Welcome to another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel, and I have a special guest.
I'm David DeWald, community manager at Ciena.com and co-host of Community Manager Live, a weekly live chat with other community managers. I guess that's pretty much it.
Yeah, we'll get into all that, but it's funny, David, is I've seen you on Twitter and LinkedIn, I think probably mostly on Twitter, and you invited me to be on one of your podcasts around, or I guess live shows around how to podcast and things like that. And I was like, and you mentioned you never had me on your podcast, Chris. I was like, no, I haven't. I really, so
what makes it bad is, the reason I kind of rib you about it is that we both lived in Raleigh, basically in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area. So we totally could have met in person and done something. That's kind of why I rib you about it. But, COVID hit. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, I live in Dallas, so I don't live in Raleigh. I've never lived
I thought
there.
you did. I thought you did.
No. I've been out there,
Okay.
but just haven't. I don't live there. But yeah.
Well, that was my bad then.
No, but I find so when I first started this Peers Over Beers, it was just a buddy of mine, and I'd go over to his house and have beers, and we would just have these really cool mics. He wasn't on video, and we would have cheese and meats and bread, and I don't know. He did this whole thing, and I was like, great, So it's, to me, hanging out with a peer talking about community management. Anyway, so I digress a little bit. Well, I digress a lot. So if you want to keep me on track, that's good. But something that intrigued me, that I think it was last week when you were having this conversation about some of the stuff around your community and how you used to build a community from scratch. And I've had a lot of people on my podcast and just in general talk a lot about, maybe blogs written about how to build a community from ground up. And, today, but you mentioned that, I started going to companies, you specifically, David, is going to companies that already had existing communities, and that you had to kind of inherit the things that somebody else did, and then, start managing those types of communities. So I'm intrigued to hear more. Maybe you can start from, we had a pre-show, a very slight pre-show around, how you started communities, et cetera. So tell me about that experience from building from ground up all the way to where you're at today.
Yeah. So my very first community I built from the ground up. It was for a video game called Dungeon Siege that was produced by Microsoft and a company called Gas Powered Games. And I back in 1998, sometime in
Wow, how old are you?
I'm 52. So yes. So back in 98, I decided to start a fan site for this game. And so I threw it up. And if you know me online, my kind of nom de plume, if you will, is historian. And it's because of that website. It was called the Dungeon Siege Historian. And the goal of the website was to just track it as it went through development, because we found out about it before, just as they started working on it. And it wasn't until I think it was 3 years later, maybe 2 years later, that it actually released. So we followed it from in conception, all the trickles of information that came out about it all the way through. And over time, as I would post as admin. But people would just say, oh, go to the historian. The historian knows, the historian this, and the historian made a post. And so the historian kind of stuck. And I haven't gotten
pretty
rid
cool.
of it.
I like it.
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm historian on Twitter. But anyway, so I started the site from the ground up.
It's funny. Whenever you ask me to be on your podcast or whatever, you sent me a message through historian. I was like, who the fuck is this? I mean, I've seen this stuff. I don't really know who's this guy or person behind this. And so I had to look it up. So anyways.
But you know what? I'm historian on LinkedIn
Yeah.
too. So you can go to linkedin.com/in/historian and you get me. And
Yeah.
it was really, I really did well until with that name. I mean, that was it. If you said historian online, you would find me. Up until there was a book that came out called The Historian. It was a vampire book of all things, and it was very popular at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got demolished by that. So, but you live with it. But anyway,
Yeah, a little hurtful.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
yeah, yeah, I was mad. It's all right. But I used to have thehistorian.org as my website because the .com was taken, and that kind of thing. Now it's just my name, daviddewald.com. But anyway, I started that community, built it from the ground up. At the time, GameSpy, which is now IGN, said, "Hey, you're doing a great job. How about we host it for you under our Planet RPG, which is role-playing games?" And so I became, Dungeon Siege historian under Planet RPG, and then eventually the site, had another site merge into us there, and then our site got bigger again when we became Planet Dungeon Siege, which was completely IGN, type thing. So it just grew. It lasted, the website lasted for the 14 years until IGN shut them down. I left it after about 8 years, and it just continued running on. And at that time, there wasn't a name for community management. And so the title that I kind of gave myself was community liaison, which
Nice.
isn't that far off.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah. So,
but now it's corporatized. Manager, senior manager,
senior manager,
exactly.
Director,
Exactly.
Chief Community Officer.
Yeah.
Hello. But yeah. So now it's formalized. But I built that from the ground up. So that's kind of where my bread and butter. If you know Rich Millington as a community manager, that at Fever Bee, same story. He started a fan site for a video game, turned it into a career. So it's the path that a lot of early community managers took. They worked for video games and then they turned it into a career. Some of them still work in the video game industry. Some of
Brian
them,
Oblinger, he did that.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, his In Before the Lock podcast, In Before the Lock is a gamer term, which means that, I'm going to get my comment in before the moderator comes in and locks this thread because it's off topic, inappropriate. So In Before the Lock.
I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So In Before the Lock. That's where that came from. I'm sorry I took that, Brian, if you have never explained that to anybody. I just did. But yeah, so ground up, I built it. It's how a lot of our early community managers got our start, was fan communities for something that turned into something bigger. And we just made it bigger. And I did that for a lot of years. I'd go to a company and kind of start a community from nothing, which means interacting with all of the departments within the company, finding out who, my stakeholders are, what their needs were from the community, what they could offer the community in exchange for what they wanted, and just figure out the best way to build it up. Is it around the products? Is it around use cases? How do you do it? And just figuring that all out. And I realized that while, I did have a stint as a community manager early days of taking over an existing community, it was different because it was video games, and it's a lot different than corporatized stuff, like you said. So I realized I had this gap in my skill set of not being able to take over an existing community and work with it. And I've had some successes, and I've definitely had a failure. I can absolutely say that, where I wasn't successful and I didn't
talk about the failure more. I'm interested.
So I won't name the company, but it was an existing community, and I was hired in, and just the way that it was structured, one department kind of owned the platform itself. So I didn't have a lot of control over what I could do as far as changing things and making them better. I didn't have a lot of good, it was just a role that wasn't in the right department, is basically what it was. I was a community manager, but the community manager position was in one department when it really should have been in another. And I was really ineffective. It was hard to show my success because I couldn't change things a lot to improve them. So it really turned into this glorified moderator position where I just kept the community clean and couldn't do anything. And eventually, you could say that it was poor performance on my part that got me let go. You could say what they said, which was, hey, we're reorganizing and your position has been eliminated.
Well, I mean, what's the lesson learned? I mean, I already learned the lesson, but what
try to own the platform as a community manager, at least have a strong say in what you can do with it. You should be the bottom line. And where I am today at Ciena, we have kind of a cohort of people that are involved with my Ciena community, basically. So, there's myself who kind of manages the community, quote unquote, and I kind of own, from a corporatized sense, I kind of am the product owner of the community. But we also have the knowledge team that's in there, and they have their piece in the community that they manage and they handle. We've got the learning, team, our that would be, what some people would call training is in there, and they have a piece
academy and stuff like that.
Yeah, and they have their piece and they manage that, and so. But when the buck stops, if it's the look and feel change of the website, if it's a functionality change that impacts kind of my area, then I have kind of say in there, and I can say I don't like that, or I like that, but let's change this. A good example is that we have customer success in our community, and they're looking to ramp up some events, and the component that we use in our community for events is not good. So, but it was on my roadmap to fix. It's like you can post events, it kind of works, it's not great, it doesn't tell anybody anything. But on my roadmap to fix, they came in and said, we really want to start doing events, but we need to kind of have a good way to do it in the community. So it went from down the road on the roadmap to let's get this taken care of as soon as we can. Yeah.
So let's go backwards real quick. This is very intriguing. I want to kind of go back to, you joined Ciena. Was that an existing community that had already? Okay. So talk about that. And the kind of stuff you had to go through and figure out and do, and the challenges.
Yeah. So my predecessor, Heather, is an amazing community manager. She's still out there. She's still working, very organized, and kind of left things in a good spot to pick it up. All the information was there. I just had to find it and use it. The challenge is that I didn't always know the processes she had in place and who she worked with in those processes. So during my first year, it was really, I got to figure all this out and where it is and what it is and how it works. And because of that, some of the processes really broke down. And, I don't know if I could have done anything different to change that, but it was a failure on my part that these things didn't hold up over time.
I don't know if it's a failure, right? Like, it's just, some of the things just didn't know. I mean,
and it didn't help that there was a gap. So she left the company, and then 3 months later I was hired. So, those processes were breaking down before I got there. Because nobody was doing the touch bases and check-ins and doing what
the CM stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The internal CM stuff within the company. And so it took me a while to kind of get up to speed and get understanding of where things are. In the time that I'm doing that, I'm also looking at the community and seeing where it can be improved, and what changes we can make. So what I've been working on is kind of, it's a very much a support community. If you have a question, you get your answer and you're gone. And that's not very sticky. And I'm going to cough, so excuse me.
No worries.
And so you kind of, you want to broaden it beyond that so that it becomes a little more sticky, that there's more content than question, answer, and I'm gone. You want question and answer, and hey, there's another question that I know about, I'll stay around and answer that.
Or discussion or something.
Or a discussion or something. We had an ideation piece that was built in that people could submit ideas and do that with. And that process of getting those ideas together, submitting them to Steam to look at, that had broken down before I had joined.
That's a tough one, man. It's a really tough one to kind of make successful.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I'm kind of right in the middle of. I've got everything in place. Kind of even today, I got an email that kind of put the last couple of items in place so that I can kind of roll that out to the audience. my audience, and hopefully be successful with it.
Is that on the platform, the ideation, or is it a separate platform? Okay.
No, I'm on Salesforce. If anybody's curious,
Okay.
I'm on Salesforce's Experience Cloud, used to be Community Cloud. We won't pick on them for changing the name because they didn't know what to do with Community Cloud, but Experience Cloud makes sense. Because it's more of an experience than a community sometimes. Sorry, Salesforce. Sorry. You're the 800-pound gorilla, but it's a little bit of a beast to work with sometimes.
It's a beast. I don't like. I tell folks is when you look at community platforms, if you want to feel like you have to develop an entire platform, that's basically it. You got to get a partner to do all that. You need a developer in general to kind of manage at least part-time, to do things that you want. So it's a tough one. Anyways,
when I was on Jive, I was
we digress.
when Jive was when Jive was a thing, I was a developer on Jive. So if it didn't work, I would build it. And Salesforce, I just haven't built up that skill set yet to be able to do that. But
it's a big skill set as a community manager to have to do that too.
Well, it helps that I started way back when as a web developer. So,
that does.
Yeah, I mean, when you have that kind of root, it makes it easy to say, okay, this is broken. Maybe we can fix it, or this doesn't work the way I want it. Maybe we can change it. A lot of using community platforms is working around the limitations and figuring out ways to do the things.
So I use, not to digress, but I used to use whenever I was at Rexel, a company called Telligent. Now they're bought by Variant. And the beauty about that platform is I had a developer that could just go in and do a lot of really cool things, but the problem is when you upgrade, you can't upgrade, but you could do some really cool stuff, and I love doing that. So I had a whole roadmap I'd build just for him, and including myself, but it was pretty crazy. So that's the beauty of it. There are downfalls to it, especially if he left.
So broken down processes, not knowing who my internal champions were, so to speak. I mean, I knew who my internal champions were, but I didn't really know who my internal contacts were. I did have a nice long list of people that were helpful in the community. I did not have any idea what they did. Or what they were helpful for. It was just like, here's my list of people that help me in the community, but I didn't have anything that said, here's what they do and here's where their knowledge lies and here's where they can help you. So I had to connect those dots, and at least I had a list to begin with, right? So it wasn't like I was starting from scratch. I had a place to begin with, and I had kind of a road I could follow. And so that's pretty much what I've done for the past couple of years. And we're starting to make changes. It's not always as fast as we would like, and it's maybe not always in the way we would like, but we get there, and we do what we can. But it's been a great experience, kind of to dig in and pick something up that somebody else built. It like I said, it does help that Heather did a wonderful job of getting it set up and getting it, and she went through the experience of, they were on Jive and they had to move to Salesforce. So she, had built it once, then had to kind of rebuild it again. So, I have a lot of, appreciation for what she did and understanding that it wasn't easy.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all do our best with what we have, and maybe the things that we know, and, you just do what you can. Sometimes there's limitations like budget and things like that, or, depending on who you're under, there's not as much buy-in or whatever. But is there anything that you would have done, like looking back, is there something that you would say, I would do this differently?
Oh yeah. So,
like
I waited a little too long to kind of connect internally. I was more focused on figuring out the processes and how the platform works, and, what I could change to make improvements that I thought I made. And I did not really connect with people internally outside of, my team, my marketing team. And that has kind of put me a little behind the ball, which made, this, when I said the ideas piece, I needed kind of internal stakeholders that could actually influence the ideas, that could say, oh, that's a good idea. Let's see if we can work that into the product. I didn't have those. She did. And I just didn't know who they were. I mean, they were there, but I didn't know who was who and what they knew and how they could help. And I didn't pursue that quickly enough. I should have jumped on that, and it might have made things a little easier to implement some of this stuff down the road.
Yeah.
I could have probably had this ideas piece 3 months ago if I had already had my ducks lined up for people, that I knew to connect. But you live and learn,
Yep.
It's just one of those things. I would do that, get your internal stakeholders, know who you need to talk to, know who the internal champions are, people who are interested in being in the community as quickly as you can. And then kind of incorporate that into learning the community, how it's laid out, why it's structured the way it is. It didn't help that at the same time I was onboarding, they were in the process of redesigning the look and feel of the website of the community. So there was that going on as well. So there was just a lot of things in motion, and I made choices based on what I thought was correct, that in hindsight, I know that I probably should have chose a little different.
Yeah, I think that internal buy-in, internal relationship building, understanding who does what, and what they're already going through and what they're doing is probably, you hit it right on. I think that, when you go into organization, in my mind, the first thing you do is start calling people, right? Like, and start having these 30-minute conversations. It's something I tell people all the time is, when I start an organization, the first thing I do for the next 2 weeks is I just get on the phone. I have some ideas of who I need to talk to, who I want to talk to, who's already going to be bought in or who's not. Even if I don't know them, I've got specific roles, like I know PM is going to be a big opportunity. I know that, the PS team potentially support, not necessarily, definitely so I start talking to those folks and the smart people that are going to help me, but also at that higher level. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that to me is kind of the key. That way, they can bring, hey, I'm doing these things. But the other thing I would tell organizations, though, is that when you hire a community leader, it's making decisions of, especially whenever you start from scratch, is platform or redesign or anything like that, like you were talking about, is why not wait until the community leader is there to help kind of do, that's what they do. That's their jobs,
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes they can't just put stuff on hold and go.
No, if it's already going, fair enough. This community person, Heather, leaves in the middle of the redesign. I mean, you got to finish it, but
right. And it's like I said, because of the way that the community is structured, this impacted a lot of people. It wasn't just the community part of it, but the support piece of it was making changes. And the knowledge team was going through kind of their own change in that they were going from more traditional old knowledge to not the KCS, which is knowledge centered service. And so they were doing their own changes. So there was a lot of moving parts, and you do what you got to do to kind of make things flow. And there was another thing. The other thing that I think I learned along the way is there would be times, because I'm not familiar with the platform, that I would go to the team that kind of manages the platform, and I would say, can we do this? And they would say,
David, you still there?
it worked.
Something's happening. Oh, there we go. Can you say it again?
Oh, yeah. I said, yeah. So I would go to them and say, can we do this on the platform? And they would look at it as a perspective of, is this possible with the way it is configured today? And the reality is that if I had said, I wanted to do this, they would have helped me figure out a way.
How to do it.
And that was a communication difference, right? It's me being kind of exploratory and them saying, no, it just doesn't do that, rather than me being more directive and saying, I would like it if the community could do this, let's figure out how to do it. And that's something that it took me a year to figure out. That if I just say I want it, the hard way. If I want this, I just got to say I want this. And that's kind of where we are today. I kind of, instead of how do we do this, or can this be done, it's more of, this is what I wanted to do, let's figure out how to make that happen.
That's good. You're on the marketing team?
I am. I'm in the marketing team in a small subsection called digital marketing,
Yeah.
and that handles everything from uh, advertising, on the web and
Yeah.
emails and the website, the front.com website. It's probably a really good place. If you're going to be in marketing, that's kind of the best place to be for a community, because, the .com and the community often kind of leverage each other, so
Right.
and their look and feel, and you will typically inform our look and feel. It will,
Yeah, of
it won't
course.
be a one-to-one, but when they make changes, we have to look at it and say, is this something we can incorporate? And, brand guides too. If the brand guide changes, we have to go in and change colors or gradients or whatever we're working on. We've got to keep that in mind. And so marketing usually is the driver of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know about your organization, but I report to the CMO, and our digital kind of piece also reports to the CEO. So we're kind of peers
Mhm.
in some ways, or pretty much. But it's interesting that you brought that up, because when you have a support community, for example, the things that you're trying to solve are support like questions. So maybe
Mhm.
it's case deflection or whatever. Um, and but marketing cares about the top of the funnel,
Yep.
in most organizations, and maybe they care about the customer, or they just care about getting case studies and references and stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Which is
um,
something the community can help with.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Um, but it's hard too, because sometimes for me, it feels like, I care about the customer, and I want the customer to get the most out of, the product. I want them to adopt it more,
Mhm.
over time they become more advocates. They, buy more. They, renewals are generally at higher rates whenever so there's a lot of really good business, but it's really focused in on that customer base. And when you're in marketing, a lot of times it's hard because there's some of this, right? So you're like, well, we should do some campaigns on our existing customers, maybe an upsell, cross-sell opportunity, and
Mhm.
start tracking that kind of stuff. Well, no, we need to look at top of the funnel and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, I say all that, and especially with support communities, and you're like, hey, you're in a good spot, and you probably are, but how about documentation dot whatever.com? How about Academy? How about support? All those are digital sites too.
Yep. Yep.
you know, they don't really, and I find even at my last organization that they really didn't, and I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but they didn't really see those sites as that important. They think it's important, but that's not something they have to really deal with. And they'll just kind of throw, hey, we're changing our logo, we're changing this, make sure you do it too, kind of stuff. But I don't know.
I guess we're pretty cohesive. Ciena is kind of two companies in one. We have Ciena and we have another one called Blue Planet, and it's the same company, but we kind of run independently.
Yeah.
And so there's two of everything, but our support is all together. So so if you want support, it's all in one portal and you just go there. But when you leave Blue Planet's site, you drop into Ciena almost immediately. It's Ciena. So what we did is we created kind of an interstitial, so that when you leave Blue Planet on a link there, you land on a page that's still Blue Planet. You're in the
Hmm,
community, but it's just kind of a Blue Planet carve out. And then once you leave
that's
that
pretty cool.
page, you're into the greater community. And so that's kind of how we did that. But because of those kind of interconnections, I interface with the the learning team for Blue Planet as well as the learning team for Ciena,
Yeah.
because they're separate, but they're still together. They're both learning and they share a spot in the community, and that works pretty much with everything. Their marketing team I interface with to help with promoting stuff. So even though I'm not part of them, they
Yeah.
interact. And knowledge, they have a different knowledge team than the Ciena does. Like I said, support is kind of all the same because it all lands in the same interface, and to them it doesn't look any different. And then we have customers that are with both, right? So
Yeah.
it just depends. But I have been very successful in kind of putting fingers in all of the separate departments. So I have a
That's great.
contact when I have a knowledge issue. I have support contacts when somebody has a support issue. The account itself is getting registered, and getting the accounts is yet another team that I have to interface with. And just we do these meetings where we kind of all get together and we say, here's what we're working on, here's what we're doing. And what's going on. And then, we have yet another meeting that's here's what's going on with the whole of Salesforce, not just Community Cloud or Experience Cloud, but also what's, Service Cloud, what's going on with, other stuff. And we do these kind of meetings so that everybody kind of knows what's going on the same page, and we ripple that out. So what happens in there, I'll share with people in my, group. And when we make changes, even if it's a different team making a change, and I think it'll be beneficial to people, I'll tell them. So,
Yeah,
it
great.
just rolls out.
Well, David, I know you have to get going here shortly, but definitely thank you for coming. And this has been really eye-opening to me and really helpful to think about,
It's been fun.
Coming into a community that you're already part of, or that you're not starting from scratch, and you have to kind of just start managing and thinking about that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. The really the takeaway from this is, you're going to make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. Just own them, and not everything will work. So just own that too, and keep trying stuff, but like I said, own it. If you mess up, just go to somebody and say, all right, I messed up. I made a mistake. And, more than likely they'll like, okay, let's see what we can do to fix this, and move forward.
Shit happens, man. Well, thanks for another Peers Over Beers, and thank you everyone for coming in. And David, thanks so much for coming. I'm Chris Detzel and
David DeWald.
All right, David, thanks so much.
Yeah, take care, man.
All right.